Give me this one line right here.
This one. Sebastian, why won't you tell me where you're going?
Give me this one again.
Sebastian, why won't you tell me where you're going?
Good, so won't. Put a T on that, yes. You can hear the T. Try again.
Sebastian, why won't you tell me where you're going?
Good, better. One more time. Put that, let me really hear that T on the end. Won't.
Sebastian, why won't you?
What's important for a great story is the moments where you can connect and say, that's me, that's mine. And one of the best innovations that Shakespeare gave us was the moment when the shepherd spoke to the duke, when the chambermaid spoke to the countess, when every man had a voice in a play, the moment when theater became not just something for the higher classes, not just something for the nobles, but something for every man.
I know it sounds ridiculous, but this project scares me to death.
We'll spend about a year in Maplewood, interviewing people and conducting story circles and digging into the history of the neighborhood. We'll find out what makes the neighborhood tick, what the hopes and dreams of the denizens are, and then we'll write a contemporary adaptation of Romeo and Juliet that reflects all of that.
Yes, and we'll use the actual words and stories of the people that live here. And we'll shut down the street and put up a stage. And perform it for free.
And we'll cast half professional actors and half just people from the neighborhood.
Yes! No.
Why would we do that?
It has been unlike anything else I've ever done before. The scope of the project is very large, both in terms of how long it takes to put together and in terms of how many people are involved and from what sectors of the universe they come from.
So what happens with this project is we spend a year in a specific neighborhood and we interview residents, business owners, any and everybody who make this neighborhood function. And so the playwright takes those stories and adapts a classical play from the stories that we have captured from the neighborhood. So it's been a really interesting project, like just from the inception of it and just seeing the journey of it and now seeing those stories come to life on stage is quite rewarding.
It all came from driving through St. Louis and driving down streets that were ultimately dead ends and continually driving down dead end streets and getting frustrated with that and asking, what is that about? Well, this is how we're creating community. This is how we're controlling crime. I discovered there are over 260 streets shut down in St. Louis City.
Such a great metaphor for these imaginary boundaries people in St. Louis have in their heads. And I say St. Louis, and St. Louis is a great example of this, but it's the whole country and maybe all of humanity.
And my experience with that is not by shutting something down do you create community, but by opening something up. And so I set out to say, well, what if we shut down the street and do a play? And do a play with the residents and the kids and the businesses and the churches and the schools, but build something around what is going on in that neighborhood. What are their hopes? What are their dreams? What do they see as their issues? What do they want to tell St. Louis is important to them?
If you were to turn on the news any single day, at any single moment in St. Louis, North St. Louis City is considered the worst place any person could go.
Is it safer? Is it safe? How do you define safe? Are guerrilla fighters running around with assault rifles? No.
What do you all pretend there's some kind of revival going on in Old North with your farmers markets and your Old North so-called restoration group? It's all for show.
Hippolyta, though I wooed you from Clayton, so shiny and sleek, brought you to live with old hippies, young freaks. We'll live here in wonderful Maplewood style.
I'm sure I'll get used to it after a while.
The real estate market shows no sign of leveling. We'll marry with pomp, with triumph, and with reveling.
Huzzah!
You know, anytime you can bring people into your community and experience the community, it's a good thing. And Shakespeare in the Street is one of those events that will just be outstanding for our business community and our residential community. You're going to have people come into your community 3 nights on a weekend, and some of these people will have never experienced Maplewood. And they have one view of Maplewood, and what they find will be a different view. We all form pictures of what we think something is. But when you get there, reality is a whole lot different than what you think it's going to be.
I'm Richard Schicker. I play Officer Toby Belch in the show.
I did not know that Schicker was an actual police officer.
I'm a policeman here. This is my beat specifically.
Are guerrilla fighters running around with assault rifles? No. Is ISIS running around? No.
Okay, Officer Friendly. That's enough, that's enough.
Is it safe?
I think it's important because the folks that live in this community will see, you know, me on the stage and say, hey, you know, they included Robert in this festival, and you know, Robert wanted to be in the festival, and look, you know, I think he's pretty good as an actor, so.
The residents are the experts. They're the experts. We have the tool to tell their story.
You get to play these characters or, you know, experience these people in this community, and you're like, oh wow, this is what's been happening, and the lines that they're saying in the play about, you know, the printers and the barbers and the podiatrists, you're like, what? Oh, word.
Oh, good Dr. Afif. How lucky are we that such a one as you do make your house in this violent wasteland north of Delmar.
All of St. Louis has nothing good to say about North St. Louis. And that's a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. Because I'm from North St. Louis and I am absolutely brilliant. And I choose to live here. And I'm not crazy. Goodbye, Malvolio.
No one remembers my name. When I was sold at the courthouse steps in downtown St. Louis, I told my wife, well, Fanny, we will part forever on this earth. I hope you will find me in heaven. I am a ghost of Maplewood. Remember me.
Shakespeare in the Street, they heard those stories. When they were interviewing me, they were interviewing the other person across the street, around the corner, in the park. They took the time to talk to everyone.
Hey, we're gonna be here on this night. Anyone who wants to come tell us their stories, you know, come talk to us about the neighborhood.
You know, I think that if you don't put things like this in front of people, they don't stop and ask questions or wonder or even decide that they can participate in something like this.
I think theater is important, and I think theater that speaks to a community and that a community feels like it can own is doubly important. I think it's good for the theater, I think it's good for the community.
When I first saw the play and I heard everything that was said, I felt like, wow, you all really were honest. Thanks.
This is amazing. I can't believe that, again, someone who hasn't lived here for years could really get our neighborhood and could really portray it so well.
People can do this and people do this, and gosh, I would have never thought to do that, and wow, it's out in the street.
I think it kind of gives folks hope that people from the outside are interested in what goes on in Old North and want to share it and tell our narrative.
They told every single part of our story. And everybody who lives in the neighborhood saw it was so impressed and grateful, and I think just overjoyed. I know I am.
Insofar as it is a gift, I think it's a greater gift to the rest of St. Louis. That really what you're doing, instead of gifting the community that you're working with, you're gifting all of St. Louis with that community. Like, that's the gift, is the people who come from outside the neighborhood and get to really, I hope, my wish is that they get to experience what life really is like there and get beyond the stereotypes or the preconceived notions that they have. That's a real liberating thing.
I think we think the play is the culmination. But for me, it is everything that happens after the performance. So it's after the curtain call. It's the conversations that happen on the street. It's the connections that happen between people, between cast members, between community people. Those are little and they seem very trivial to go up and say, I heard myself, or I knew the woman that one character is based on. Those things for me are the big things of Shakespeare in the Streets.